Hello and welcome to the Scary, Strange, and Outright Odd Show with your host, Joseph Jordan. Tonight, we're going to be talking about a bit of an odd case, one that's kind of intrigued me for definitely a little while here, but one that I feel like needs to not only be talked about, but be brought forth to the attention of the public a little bit more. So, the case tonight is about a girl by the name of Elisa Lam. It's a murder mystery, and one that just, it's very odd, very strange, and I think that if you're tuning into the show, that you'll find it to be very, very, very interesting. But let's start off with a question. What is it about strange murders that intrigues us so much? Is it the mystery that surrounds them? Is it the people that are involved? Or is it the fact that deep down, somewhere inside us, we fear that it could happen to us? Tonight we're going to take a look at a college student who was found dead in the most infamous of places and in the most strangest of ways. We're going to take a look at the cold hard facts of the case and speculate on the theories of what could have happened. Thank you for tuning in and enjoy tonight's broadcast of the Scary, Strange, and Outright Odd Show. Our story is going to begin tonight with the girl by the name of Elisa Lam, L-A-M. She was born April 30th, 1991, in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. Her parents were both immigrants from Hong Kong. They owned and operated a restaurant and did quite well for themselves. Now, Elisa was a very good student, grew up there, went through the school system, and was a student at the University of British Columbia. Now, something needs to be noted here. While Elisa was a good girl, typical teenager, doing good at the university, she did have a couple problems. Her main one being that Lam had been diagnosed with both the bipolar disorder and depression. She had been prescribed 4 drugs and was on them at the time: Wellbutrin, Lamictal, Seroquel, and Effexor. May or may not have butchered those names a little bit there, but she was on those drugs, and they were to deal with her conditions. Now, she was really big into Tumblr. It's a social media site, for those of you that don't know. It's a blogging site, and you can blog, just talk about your life, talk about whatever. And she was really big into it and talking about her life, and on it, she was talking about how she was taking a West Coast tour and was going to try to go to San Diego, Santa Cruz, and San Francisco. Now, only 2 days into her tour, she checked in to a place known as the S.S.O.O Hotel. The S.S.O.O Hotel was a hotel in Los Angeles, California. But the hotel also had a bit of an interesting past. You could even call it infamous, both for the murderers and the murders that had happened there. Serial killers like Jack Unterweger and Richard Ramirez had been there before. Also, something that needs to be brought up was that the Black Dahlia, I believe that I'm saying that correctly, the Black Dahlia had also been found murdered there. So this place just was not exactly the greatest hotel in the world, if you get what I'm saying. It was actually a sprawling place when it was first originally unveiled and was originally opened up to the public in the 1920s. But in the 30s, whenever the Great Depression hit, it slowly but surely slumped down. Now, that part of the city, that part of LA, never actually got back to the point of the high point, I guess you would say, as it was in the 1920s. And since then, it's just always been kind of a rundown hotel that, like we stated earlier, had a history of having both murders and murderers stay in it. Now, here is where it gets interesting. Lam was scheduled to check out of the hotel and leave on January 31st, 2013. During this time, every single day, she would talk to her parents. She would talk to her parents, just once a day, just to say, hey, Dad, hey, Mom, look, I'm doing good. I'm doing fine. Everything is going great. But on this day, she didn't talk to her parents. her parents got a little bit nervous, got a little bit worried, and decided, hey, we're going to call the LAPD just to make sure. So the LAPD started an investigation. And to their surprise, nobody could find her. Nobody had seen her anywhere. She seemingly disappeared into thin air. On February 6th, 1 week after Lam had been missing, nothing had shown up. It was during this time, on February 6th, the LAPD decided, hey, look, we're going to have to get a little bit more into the investigation of this. We can't just keep looking around for her because we can't find her. We're going to have to start going through records. We're going to have to start going through audio files. We're going to have to start going through through video camera files. We're really going to have to start getting into this. So this is where we get to the strangest, arguably the strangest part of the entire investigation, is that it was what the LAPD found that the hotel had, which was a video camera. But in this video camera tape, it was of an elevator. It was recorded inside an elevator. In this elevator tape, Elisa Lam is acting very, very odd, very, very, very suspicious. So let's get to it. The following is going to sum this up perfectly. I actually got this off the internet. I'll be reading it from here. At the start of the videotape, Lam enters clad in red zippered hooded sweatshirt over a gray t-shirt with black shorts and sandals. She enters from the left and goes to the control panel, appears to select several floors, and then steps back to the corner. After a few seconds, during which the door fails to close, she steps up to it, leans forward so her head is through the door of the elevator, and looks in both directions. And then she quickly steps back in, backing up against the wall, and then into the corner near the control panel. But the door remains open. This is the odd part. Is that the door just continues to remain open, even though she has stepped back, completely gotten out of the way, as if somebody was right there in the center of it. Now, I know that you guys can't actually see the videotape, but there's nobody there. It's just her. Her right arm can be seen going up to her head, and then she turns to recenter the cab, putting both hands on the sides of the door. She then goes to the control panel, presses many more buttons. It's kind of like I don't know if you guys have seen that movie. Elf. I know it's kind of a funny reference to think about, but the part where he's in the elevator with a guy who he sees, is pressing the buttons and they're lighting up, and then he takes his hands and he just starts ramming them down the elevator, buttons, just hitting all the buttons. That's actually almost exactly like what she's doing here. Kind of a comedic, bit of a silver lining, if you will, for uncomedic story. So she starts doing her hands through there, and then she turns to her right and begins rubbing her forearms together, then waves her hands out to her sides with palms flat, fingers outstretched, while bowing forward slightly and rocking gently. So if you will, just imagine you're sticking out both your arms out to your side, almost like a bird, and then you just start rocking forward and backward. I've done stranger things, but that still doesn't excuse this one. Now, let's see where we were at here. Then she backs up against the wall of the elevator again. By the way, the door is still open in the elevator. Still open this whole time. Maybe it's because of the buttons. Who knows? But I also find it peculiar, by the way, and I think that it's something that does need to be brought up. That it's very peculiar that the elevator door just does not close at all, like through this. Like, I understand that she's hitting the buttons or whatever, but especially in the first part where she goes into the elevator. And hits the little button for it to close, and then leans back, and it just still doesn't close, as if there's some kind of something there. You could maybe make the argument that it's some kind of ghost or spirit, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Well, she decides to finally get out and seems to be looking to the side, outside of the elevator, and then just walks away, walks outside of the elevator, and the elevator closes and goes on with its business, doing whatever elevators do in their free time, I guess. And that was the last time that that Elisa Lam was ever seen. By the way, that videotape was taken on January 31st. January 31st. Now, let's go back to February. There's just nothing coming out. Like they can't get anything. The LAPD is just having no luck whatsoever. They keep looking into it, and nothing's coming up. But something strange keeps happening. The guests are now complaining of low water pressure. You know, like whenever you turn on a shower head and it just kind of drizzles out a little bit. You know, it's not really hitting you in the face. You're not getting that beautiful, lovely shower that you so crave at the end of the day, or maybe that's just me. I don't know, but that's just not happening for them. And not only is this a couple guests, this is a lot of guests are complaining of this problem. So the hotel decides to finally look into it. This is where it gets really, really, really crazy. In the tanks, which are quite small, actually, we'll get to that in a second, they notice that there's a strange smell. One of the workers does. So they open it up. They get a couple people together and open up, get the concrete lids off, and they're looking inside it, and they find her body. They find the body of Elisa Lam right there inside one of the water tanks. Wow. Holy cow. Of course, the LAPD is notified, as well as Mr. and Mrs. Lam. And an autopsy report is filed. Now, here's something else that's kind of interesting, is what the autopsy report actually says. The autopsy report states that she had died due to accidental drowning, and her bipolar disorder and depression both played a part into her drowning. Okay. All right. There was also no evidence of sexual assault or suicide. All right. But this is also where it gets crazy. Despite the fact that in the report it says that there is no evidence of sexual assault or suicide, it's ruled as a suicide. I mean, wow. That's kind of crazy. Kind of crazy. Now, there are a couple variables here that are actually going to arouse suspicion, as you might be able to tell. Like, who would do this? What is the reason for her odd behavior in this videotape? And how did she get into the tank by herself? The tanks, the water tanks are 4 by 8 feet. So these really are wide, but overall, I mean, they're pretty small. And there's a very narrow door to get in them. Now, here's the thing too that's interesting, is that they're up on top of concrete blocks. And the only way to access them is to remove heavy concrete lids. You know, like lids on the top. Extremely heavy lids. So that would mean that that Lam would have to not only climb on top, but she would have to remove the lids herself, and she would somehow have to be able to put herself in there and put the lids back on. I don't know, folks. This doesn't strike me as being an accidental or suicide. You know, I don't know. There's something a little bit fishy going on here. Maybe that's just me. What's also odd, and what was noted in the report, was that the LAPD brought canine units, and the canine units did not pick up on her scent on the roof at all. Now, granted, I couldn't find too much information on these canine reports, and And I can completely see how, in California, especially under that sun, maybe if it had rained, I don't really think it does rain in California, but if it did rain, if there was weathering occurring, I could most certainly see how your scent could be lost, especially on a rooftop. But it just is something to be noted that the canine units did not actually see or find any of that stuff. Now, as of this recording, there is no new information that has been presented. Nada. So I ask of you listeners, if you or anybody that you know has any information concerning Elisa's case, I urge you to please contact the authorities to help out in any way possible. I know that on shows like this, and I know that whenever we read this kind of stuff, it's always really interesting to sit here and to look at this as being a mysterious death, and as being maybe the all the facts didn't add up to what we wanted. But at the end of the day, Elisa was a daughter. I mean, she was a friend. She had family, and so I just ask of you that if you do know anything about it, out of respect for her and out of respect for the family, please contact the authorities. Thank you very much. And now, with that being said, and me presenting to you the facts and the very odd death of Elisa Lam, one question remains. Well, a couple questions remain, excuse me. How and why? Do you think it was a suicide? Do you think it was some weird accidental death? Do you think it was caused by other people? Or do you think that she somehow was able to do it to herself and kill herself? And maybe she was just hallucinating in the elevator video due to maybe her drugs, maybe another mental disorder. I mean, these are all questions that you, the viewer, the listener, can decide. Until then, thank you for listening to the Scary, Strange, and Outright Odd Show. I'm your host, Joseph Jordan, reminding you that the truth is always out there.